Here I am. Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out the Massage Mentor interviews. As you know, as I keep saying, the back jam is happening in May. The shoulder, hip, and neck jam are available at the Massage Mentor Institute. If you've missed any of these fantastic events online, uh, they're there. You can get them. Jams are a series of online workshops that focus on one body part with over 10 industry leaders. You get over 10 workshops in one, and you will have lifetime access to each jam. But enough about the jams and the Massage Mentor Institute. I have Walt Fritz! What is up? Well,
No idea. I had no idea, Dane, that we were doing this live. I don't know if I really want to participate because typically there needs to be an edit button, like a 10-second delay when I do podcasts, because I really sometimes struggle to behave myself. Okay, so I'm really going to rein it in here. Now that
Here's
I'm
the
live.
thing. Here's the thing that I think that there is a certain with my honesty. Can you hear me?
I can now, yes.
Okay, as I'm very, I want people to just be as they are. Everybody plays a part, and everybody has their insights and views on different things. So just saying. So
Okay.
you've been around for 35 years. You've done amazing things. You have a little bit of a focus now, but I'm gonna let you tell us a little bit about your beginnings, and only because here's the thing: you started out kind of having a point of view, it seems, and then you've kind of shifted that point of view. So I see you thought I might not just dive in, but I'll dive into that if you
Yeah.
want.
Yeah.
But maybe tell me a little bit about your history. You're from New York.
Yeah.
You've been around a really long time.
Yeah. So you said I've been around 35 years. I've actually been around 63 years. Um, yeah, I don't want to go. I don't want to go back to 35 again. No, I don't want to do that.
That was
Um,
a rough,
but
that was a rough
it,
time.
oh yeah. So I am a PT. I'm a physical therapist. I live in New York State, but not in New York City. I'm way up in upstate New York, probably kind of as rural as your lovely little knotty pine background is there for everyone to see. Um, I have a physical therapy practice in a very small rural village south of Rochester, and I have a kind of a part-time practice here, and I teach and travel part-time as well. Um, being a PT, graduated in 1985, long before evidence-based practice became sort of the required norm, as well as anything beyond a bachelor's degree, which is, I'm just doing a master's degree right now at age 63, I feel like it's time for me. But I started in PT doing pediatrics, early intervention, hospital-based stuff, developmental disabilities, all sorts of things that a PT might and can do. And in the early 90s, I got my arm twisted to take a myofascial release class. I say twisted because back in the early 90s, myofascial release was being just routinely bombarded by the American Physical Therapy Association as being a non-credible modality built entirely on pseudoscience. And I'm pretty impressionable and gullible, and I bought what they sold, and I didn't want to take any work. And then the early intervention center that I was working at the time, we hired a PT who had done some training with Barnes and Upledger back in the 80s. And I mean, he came as close to twisting my arm as one could, but it helped because employers paid for all your continuing ed back then. So my arm was twisted, but I didn't have to put anything out of pocket, which was really good. During a brief period of time, I took a Barnes class, took an Upledger class, and I was like really hooked in that. I just went down the rabbit hole. Like nobody could even see my feet sticking out. I was so far down. I aligned better with the approach that Barnes taught versus Upledger because I didn't like somebody saying, "Oh no, that's 6 grams of pressure. That's way too much. Don't use that much." Right? That just bugged the crap out of me. So I really liked the Barnes approach, and I followed along his curriculum. And probably about 3 years later, I started being a teaching assistant for him, and I kind of worked my way up in the ranks of teaching assistants for the next 10 years. And I like that model. In hindsight, we can all reflect on that. I was a good follower. I bought the model, I bought the system, I bought the beliefs. The work worked, and to me that was enough. and it was often presented at that. Who cares about evidence as long as we help people? And that's true to a certain extent. There's a big but there, but I don't know how deep I'm going to go into the but. Finally, in 2005 was sort of a benchmark year for me, because there was a discussion on a website called Soma Simple, which some of your viewers might be familiar with. Soma Simple at the time was a pretty big deal for some people, because they were all neurocentrically informed clinicians of all sorts who routinely deconstructed other models. And I didn't really understand what a deconstruction was. To me, deconstruction was French for disrespecting. Okay, so I caught wind of the Soma Simple deconstruction, and I went on there to defend my modality, which is now fascial release, my mentor, which was John Barnes, and my community, which was all the other MFR clinicians. And what happened was about 6 to 9 months of just basically repeated toilet flushing, of nobody listening to one another. Well, no, let me correct that. I didn't listen to them. They were presenting me with evidence of neurocentric views of manual therapy impacts and manual therapy effects. And all I did was sort of regurgitate the evidence that I was presented in the MFR classes. And the discussion slash deconstruction slash argument really never amounted to anything, because I wasn't budging and they weren't budging. And I got kicked off that group probably 5 or 6 times for bad behavior. And I was let back on 5 or 6 times with promises of good behavior that, of course, I could never keep. And finally, after about 6 to 9 months, I don't remember what it was, it finally basically just sort of spun itself out, and they closed the thread. And it wasn't long after that that I made the choice, through a number of circumstances, to leave the MFR model and my mentor and sort of venture off on my own. And a common story that's told on social media is that I left because I started seeing the light of the holes in that theory, and that's not true at all. I left for a totally different reason. It wasn't until after I left that I really started looking at what other models and what other people had to say. I revisited Soma Simple a year or two later and started actually reading all the stuff that I didn't read when they presented it to me. And I started reaching out to some people on that forum for help. And because of previously mentioned bad behavior, nobody wanted to talk to me. No one wanted to engage with me, except for Diane Jacobs, Canadian physiotherapist, who, she sort of coined the term dermal neuromodulation. And Diane was very patient with me and didn't call me a dolt or anything like that, for really not being able to budge from understanding how the work that was explained to me as MFR, and then we had these positive effects, how it couldn't be the fascia, right? But she did. She was patient with me. I took her class. It's funny because the memory actually just popped up on Facebook this morning. 10 years ago today, I took her first class, or her class, for the first time. And it was really sort of a really cathartic experience for me, because picture yourself for a moment, Dan, you're sitting in a room with, a lot of other people, and you're watching people do work, do intervention, do evaluation, that if you stuck earplugs in your ear, it looks identical to what you do for a living. But then you pull the earplugs out of your ears, and they're telling an entire different story. Now, it would be wrong for anybody to say, well, they're telling the right story and you know the wrong story, right? Because we know how that goes. I love a statement in some of the communities that I hang out on Facebook, that there's not necessarily a right answer, but there's some that are less wrong, And that's what I was hearing, was maybe some explanations that were possibly less wrong, or at least a broader perspective. So that was really intriguing from me. I learned a lot from Diane. I learned a lot from a lot of other people, including a lot when it comes to behavioral sciences, psychological research and models, et cetera. In fact, just a couple weeks ago.
Let me jump.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm interrupting.
I'm sorry. I can go on for your entire hour long or whatever.
Okay. A couple of weeks ago, we'll come back to that. Mm-hmm. But what was one of the, so, you said you had ideas, and then you were explaining, someone's, all of a sudden they let you back in, even though you were nothing but a troublemaker. You get back and you're like, okay, maybe there's something to all this. And you have a good listen. So what are some of the things, as you look back at, that really jumped out at you as information that you wanted to hear more of?
I think one of the most simple concepts, which took me a long time to really wrap my head around, is something that not just Diane talks about, but a lot of people talk about. When you and I touch someone, right? We reach out and we touch them with the thought that, okay, I'm working on a fascial restriction. I can feel it, that there it is right there. When we move the skin in a certain way or move the tissues in a certain way, we identify and label that pathology deep within a person. And whether it's a muscle issue, a fascial issue, a joint issue, a lymph issue, a nerve issue, or whatever, we have this sense that we can somehow, part the waters and metaphorically reach into that person and both find the problem and find a way to selectively influence that structure, tissue, or pathology, leaving all the waters of the wall of the biblical sense, like over here, because we've got secret access. And I know I'm a little histrionic when it comes to that kind of stuff, but that's how I learned MFR, that what we're feeling is fascia restriction. What we're treating is fascia restriction. And I love Diane Jacobs's, sort of simple bluntness. It's like the only thing we ever know that we're doing with any certainty is touching a person's skin. Can we begin explaining both problems and solutions from simpler models like that? And, Diane can explain it from a skin perspective. I do different models. I take a look at how, when we touch somebody in a contextually appropriate, gentle way, we're influencing C-tactile afferents, which immediately feeds into interoceptive centers, which allows self-regulation on the part of our patient themselves, without us being, that magic guru who's got that touch. Those are some of the really impactful pieces that made me say, I don't think anybody's got all the answers. We're all searching what's going on with all of us. And that's where I'm at right now, is instead of seeing it, okay, this is a fascial patient, this is a muscle patient, this is a nerve patient, right? I'm trying to look for the common denominator. And I think the fact that we're working with a human being and not a system or a set of tissues, I think that's been the most important aha over the past 10 years for me.
That's a good aha. I like the way you explained that. That was a good aha. And then I interrupted you, and you were just saying a couple weeks
Yeah,
ago.
that was really freaking rude. A couple weeks ago, I don't know, on one of the groups I belonged to, I think it was a Canadian massage group, there was someone was on there and they were defending their model, defending this and that. And that stuff gets a little old sometimes, at least for me, because I've gotten the crap beat out of me on some of these defend your model type of perspectives. And but basically it was like, you know what, instead of all this stuff, show me a paper or two that basically supports your premise, right? Not your book, because you wrote the book, right? But give me something hard that I can sink my teeth into. And then all of a sudden that person disappeared and never returned. And I thought, okay, that's telling. But then I sort of held myself to the same standard. I said, okay, well, what paper, if someone really said, put up or shut up, what paper supports your views, Walt? And I made a post about this on social media a couple of weeks ago. And I think some people are a little like aghast at my choice, because the paper is older than me. It's a 65-year-old paper written not by a PT or a massage therapist, but by a psychotherapist. It's a 65-year-old paper written by Carl Rogers, who presented a paper at a psychological conference in 1957 that essentially got him ostracized from his profession, because what he had the audacity to say was that the gains that are seen in clinical psychology are not from the modality that we use. It's from the therapeutic relationship that we build. And I thought, what a lovely thought. Now, can you say that psychotherapeutic research is the same as MT or PT? Maybe not, right? But the concept that what you and I are sold, and I'm guessing some people who might be watching this sell, because I sell continuum ed, right? But what we sell is sort of the secret sauce science to the tissue or the pathology or whatever. And, all this sort of closeted research, that it may matter less than the relationship and everything that comes with that we end up building with that patient. And I just thought that was just a lovely place to begin a conversation about how to build a model.
I love that. That's one of my big if you had to say, how is Freedom Massage now seeing hundreds of clients a week? We're booked until end of March. It's that seeing people as people, not as numbers, not as bodies, not as things that we
Yeah,
can just fix. It's a whole
right,
big event. So
right.
I like that piece of paper. It's
Yeah.
a beautiful piece of
It's
paper.
challenging though. It's really challenging because the patient comes to us for that secret sauce science, man. They want to know that we think things that are different from the last person they saw that didn't help them. They want us to be the holder of the grail of what's wrong with them and the solution to what should be done. And I'll tell you, man, from a therapeutic relationship standpoint, it's a interesting line to walk where I stay true to the therapeutic alliance, true to shared decision making, and true to a lot of other more behavioral concepts that are inherent in my work, but yet honor the individual's need to feel like I'm in allegiance with them, that there's something going on in their body. It's a tricky path.
I think if I'm hearing you correctly, is too, you're maybe more conscious of the two sides of the brain and relating to people.
Mhm.
Meaning, like, you could just tell them something in a very fluffy way or whatever. I
Yeah,
think that's what I'm getting. Or you can break it down. Like, I'm trying to figure out this property here. I have 11 acres in Maine, and I'm trying to figure out where are the posts? Where's this? Where's that? I'm trying to figure out the grid of land. And I was out there and I'm like, oh my God, I'm walking around in 11 acres, shit hit me in the face. And then I got a guy who does.
so Diane, you're kind of pixelating there with your voice. I missed everything past I got a guy.
So I'm coming back. So I got a guy and he does surveys. Okay.
Okay, got it.
So
Yeah,
he looks and he holds his finger up and then he zips on through and he explains to me that there's certain marks on the trees, there's certain things I need to look for, right? So he gave me a visual, he gave me tools, he gave me information beyond me just galloping through the woods trying to find shit that I don't even know how to find. So if
yeah,
I'm understanding you correctly, it's kind of almost like that. Like, some people need to understand, like, have that evidence, have that
yeah.
there is some truth to what I'm saying. I can show you a little bit by here. Is that am I picking up what you're putting down?
I think so. I think so. So let me go with 2 points here. First of all, people come into us with a story. They all do, right? Whether it's their story, whether it's Dr. Google's story, whether it's their last 55 therapist stories, right? They come in with this tapestry of a story. Okay. And here I am thinking their story is crap. Or thinking, really, you really think that? That's kind of what I want to say, but I keep myself in check. Now, when I was Mr. Fascia, I would swing their story over to a fascial fairy tale, right? That it's all about your fascia. Sorry, I'm very disrespectful. That it's all about your fascia. And you know what? They buy it because it came to me, they come to us for our expertise, right? But then I went neurocentric and then, oh, no, it's not your fascia anymore. Even though I said it a couple of years ago, now it's your nerves, right? And now what I do, instead of saying, okay, I have to insert the story that's correct, I allow a person's lived experience to be a dominant factor in everything we talk about. So Diane, if you come into me telling me you really think your fascia is all jacked up and it needs to be released, it's like, okay, great, let's work with that, right? I can keep my mouth shut for a while. And if then you start asking me, well, what do you think? I would say to you, well, Diane, it certainly could be that jacked up fascia, like, you or Dr. Google or somebody told you. And then what I try and do is insert an alternate possibility. I tended to reach for the neurocentric possibility, and I'll say something really generic and somewhat meaningless from a neurocentric perspective. That could be something like, you know what, Diane, it could be sort of a neurologic remnant that your nervous system just hasn't let go of yet. But then I'll say, whether it's jacked up fascia or a neurologic remnant, I kind of turn it around and say, but right now, what I'm doing, what we're doing, does this feel relevant? Does this feel useful? Does it feel like it might be helpful for you? It's almost like inserting uncertainty to allow them to see, to know that they're not wrong, but there's a lot of other answers that could be right. I think that's such a, I don't know, I think it's such a really neutrally defined concept to allow a person's lived experience while me saying, you know what, I don't know whether that's the right story.
It's really deep without being overly deep. It's still grounded.
It takes a while to be
I
able to
like
come
it.
up with something. Yeah. And I, very few of my patients come into me with a neurocentric story or a behavioral influence story. It tends to be tissue based. So it's easy for me then to insert something, and I want enough of a divide between the two to really make them go, oh, wait a minute. It could be both, right? It just to give them that little bit of shiver time to say, oh man, that's right, right? But then I let them know, ultimately, I may help you, but I may never know what was wrong with you, which is equally as troubling to some people, or equally freeing to other people, right? Instead of it being about what's wrong with your tissue, can we now come up with strategies that you might find helpful?
I love that. And too, it's, if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like you're giving them permission to know their bodies too.
Absolutely, because who am I to judge or to criticize or to question your lived experience, right? I think the more education slash indoctrination that we receive, the more we feel that we're equipped to correct someone's lived experience. And I just think there's something inherently wrong about that. Yesterday morning, this is a brand new thing, and I wanted to get this in before you interrupt me so rudely again. No, interrupt me at any time, please. I was talking about a patient exactly about this experience. She was kind of like, she was a new patient. She wanted to know, what do you think, Walt? Like, as soon as somebody says, what do you think, Walt? Well, there's my opening. I don't club them over the head immediately and say, you're wrong, Diane. I wait to be invited in, and then I do it softly, right? But I equated it to my own personal experiences. My favorite kind of pastime reading is historical fiction. I absolutely adore a well-written historical fiction novel. Now, what is historical fiction? It's typically based on a central core of fact, whether it's an event or characters, right? And then the story is written, the fiction evolves around that, right? Where we don't know what Abraham Lincoln said to, whoever, right? So we're going to put some dialogue in there, and we're going to put some other characters in there to create the story that we want to flow. And I kind of saw a parallel between how we're taught manual therapies, how we're taught exercise therapy, how we're taught all sorts of things, right? That in MFR, the way I was taught it, there was this core base of non-proven factoids that are still taught today. Some of them actually are in the evidence, right? Piezoelectric effect is useful for certain kinds of bone growth, et cetera, right? Has it ever been proven to apply to fascia? I don't know whether it actually has ever been proven, but people say it's the same thing as in bone. So they're sort of borrowing that factoid and creating this historical fiction. Not that it's a total fabrication, not that any of our models are a total fabrication. They're not. They're built from a core of solid, older science perhaps, but then they're reaching for these rather disparate pieces of evidence or pseudo evidence to build this model in a way that when presented in the closed room of a continuing ed room, they all seem to make sense. And you're in trouble if when you start asking critical thinking questions in a class and somebody shuts you down or you get bullied, it's time to leave. It's time to find, an open source type of a thing. So I think that all we've been taught are sort of historical fiction. Every one of us, including myself, and then I fabricate a story that goes along with my biases of behavioral sciences influence, et cetera, on our manual therapy experience. And if we could simply see our work as this conglomeration of fact and fiction, metaphors and narratives and everything else that goes into it, instead of getting our panties all bunched up when we get somebody challenging us on Facebook about, questioning your beliefs or whatever. I just think, it would be a lovely world if we could do that.
There's so many things that you're saying where I have all this little side notes on, but I love the way that you're explaining yourself, and it's all coming across really clear to me. And like I said, it's touching a lot of different pieces of. I really like too that you said if you're in a class and you have questions and get kind of brushed aside or shut down, that some people would just take shame and guilt and let that keep them there instead of maybe
Yeah,
realizing. So I
yeah.
just, again, I think it's a really good overplay. I'll tell you what I was thinking. No,
Go,
should I? Well, I was
go.
thinking, like for me, the first thing that popped in my head, and this is totally not about massage at all, was when I was, trying to get my life together and I was taking classes and I was joining this church. And then when I found out, they found out that I was a gay woman, they were like, you can't be in our church. And I was like, wait a minute. I was like, so all these facts were like put together that I'm going to burn in hell and die, but I'm
Yeah,
sitting, it was just so confusing. I was so confused. So that was one of the first moments that like popped into my head when you were talking about that. And then
yeah,
also, just if I would bring up Buddhism around the wrong people, then it would be like, and it's like, are you kidding me? At the source of the core of everything is
yeah,
nothing but alike,
yeah.
alike, alike,
Yep,
alike. So
yeah.
that's what I was thinking. Do you like how I brought
Hey,
my gayness into this art? Do you like how I did that? It was pretty artful.
it was very artful. Yeah, it's like I barely noticed it come in the room. Holy crap. It was really, my to some people, my anti-fascia stance has become who I am. And that's tempered a lot in the last 15 years since I left. But yet my disdain for any single model as single tissue, single dysfunction as the explanation for people's problems is pretty out there, right? And it was incredibly ironic because I guess it's about 2 months ago now, I got contacted by one of the coordinators of the third annual World Conference of Fascia, not the Fascial Congress, but another one of these International Fascial Congress, whatever meeting type things. So they wanted me, Mr. Anti-Fascia, to present at their conference. And I basically reached through my email and said, shook the guy and said, have you actually looked at my bio? Have you actually looked at my website? And I said, I'd be happy to create a talk for you. And I put forward a title. It's seeing the forest for the trees, understanding you can't treat a person's fascia without treating the whole person, right? I think, and I don't care whether it's a fascial congress or a muscle congress or whatever, we've all just gotten so segregated into viewing the tissue, the pathology of our choosing, as something that really exists as this entity that we can study fascia, you can study muscle, and there's a lot of excellent research out there. But I think something gets lost when you say, okay, this is a fascial technique. Is there such a thing, right? Or is there a muscle technique? Even the concept of a joint manipulation or adjustment by a chiropractor, are you selecting that joint, that spinal joint by itself, and it's popping and nothing else in the body is acting and reacting to that? I think that's really problematic. So guess what? They accepted my proposal, and I'm going to talk because they said, you know what? We need balance. You can be our balance, Walt. So good. I'm going to be the anti-fascia guy at the Fascia Congress, or at least there's a middle ground to see that you can't treat a person's fascia. You can treat a person, right? And that's really been what I've been doing now in this new world that I'm in, teaching speech pathologists, laryngeal work, and things like that. It's the same thing because they're all about, oh, you've got too much muscle tension here in your perilaryngeal muscles. We need to manipulate your larynx to drop the tone so you can speak easier, right?
Well,
Again, think,
go ahead.
what's it?
No, you're on
But
something good.
thinking that you can jump through an entire body and pick that muscle for intervention, when there's been some fabulous studies out there in the speech world of, get this, I love this study because what they did was there's a concept or a disorder in voice called muscle tension dysphonia. It's basically hoarseness, right? And it's viewed as too much muscle tension in the laryngeal musculature, right? Laryngeal structures. And it used to be that what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas perspective. The problem's here, let's manipulate there, the solution is there, right? You speak better. But someone in 2017 by the name of Nelson Roy, He gave a woman with muscle tension dysphonia a script to read, but she read it while she was in the MRI. So while she was reading the script, they were watching her brain to see what parts of her brain were active, and they noticed patterns of dysregulation where her brain was active in ways that they didn't expect from somebody with a normal voice pattern. They pulled her out of the MRI machine. They did the equivalent 1 hour's worth of laryngeal manipulation, et cetera, and they slid her back in the machine, and they had her read the exact same script. And what they saw was a more regulated brain pattern. It's like a totally different brain. Now, that study does not show that it's not here, it's here. What that study shows is it's here in the human being. The reaction was instant. Was my intervention sent immediately to the brain and that's where all the changes came? Or were peripheral tissues involved? That's stuff that it'll be unpacked by the time I'm dead, right? But to understand that our touch is multifactorial and it's not selective to the tissue that we think we're working with and that we think is problematic.
Well, tell me, well, one of the things that when I first spoke to you, I was telling you is my voice is a struggle when I talk in front of groups or I talk for a long time or after an interview. So I might come and see you, but you really do now have a little bit more of a focus on the voice and swallowing and all that. So can you tell us a little bit about that? You're offering classes for that, and kind of it's a massage therapist kind of thing can come and check out the classes.
Yeah, it wasn't until last year that I made the choice to stop teaching my upper body, lower body, kind of that MT-PT directed classes, which I taught, ever since I left Barnes. I kind of started my own show too. But I stopped teaching those last year for a number of reasons, and I really devoted my time, energy to teaching the voice and swallowing disorders type work. It's primarily speech pathologists, but I also it's a really cool mixture of professionals: massage therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, dental hygienists who come in because they're doing myofunctional work. Excuse me, voice coaches, all sorts of. I get ENTs coming, chiropractors, osteopath, and it's really, I'm 63 and I feel like I'm starting over again in a really good way, right? Starting fresh. I've got a book coming out probably in 2 weeks from a UK publisher called, thank you, Manual Therapy for Voice and Swallowing, a person-centered approach. And it's all about what we've been talking about. And sure, it's from this narrower niche of voice, swallowing, mouth, tongue, jaw, breathing, chest, etc., right? But yet the principles kind of can be broadly applied. What's really cool is when I talk to the massage therapists who come to the class, and I'm pretty blunt about things. I'm like saying, why the hell are you here, right? What brought you here? And sometimes it's, I work with performers, right? Or I see that you do a lot of jaw, neck, mouth work, and that's my clientele, so I thought I'd come. And some people say, I've heard your big mouth on Facebook a lot, and I just wanted to hear what you're like in person, right? And to see if any of this is applicable to my more general work. And I love a broad, diverse group. I love a group of people who, not that get in fist fights at a class, right? But where there's discord and there's differing opinions on what's happening and what's wrong. And I just think it's a real gift that I'm able to, that people find me worthwhile to come and take a class with me.
A friend of mine who's a fan of yours asked me to just ask you how you feel about continuing education and how it's changing.
Give me more context.
I don't know. I'm just reading what do you feel has changed in continuing education? That was the question that I was sent, and I promised I'd ask.
Yeah. I don't know that it's changed that much in the 35 years that I've been doing this kind of work. Honestly, I don't think that our professional bodies hold our feet to the fire enough to really justify our work, justify being able to offer continued education units in, okay, so this is opinionated, but in stuff that it's like, really, you think that's how the body works? Is that an important thing for an MT or a PT to know? But, that's my opinion. Other people feel like some of those fringe type of interventions are real solid science or solid part of their education. And And Diana, I actually had no idea where this person wanted or was directing me, so I'm just shooting from the hip here. But I do think there are definitely signs that of life in our shared professions when it comes to continuing ed. I think there's a lot more people accepting that evidence isn't a four-letter word, that it's okay to demand evidence without being put down for it.
Mhm.
And I know over the past 3 years with COVID and everything that's sort of unfolded with that, science and evidence really gets beat on because it changes its mind. But yeah, that's how it works, right? The more we learn to redirect. So there's my little like diatribe soliloquy on CE. And if whoever asked the question, send me an email because I don't know what in the hell you were asking me.
Perfect. And so we'll just finish up with you have classes online,
I
you
do.
have classes you'll be
I,
teaching live. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I have a very robust live teaching schedule here in the United States and abroad. Um, that I love person-to-person engagement. When somebody comes to see my class or to take a class from me, whether it's an experienced manual therapist or somebody new, I love to tell them, you think that you came here to learn some nifty hands-on skills, but what my hope is that you leave here at the end of the class with the understanding and the ability to use shared decision making in your interventions and not just this work, right? That elevating all of your interventions to one where you allow your ego to drop to a level where we're at an equal level with our patient, with our client, or whatever you call them, meaning I need your help, Diane, to help you, right? And that's really what I strive for. That's a little tougher to convey in an online course. Just a couple months ago, I kind of released a whole batch of online courses, both in the niche of the voice and swallowing and the broader perspective of a whole body class. I teach monthly deeper dives, these short 1 hour classes that we do live or you can watch recorded, that we kind of dive deep into a concept. My March one is all about oral motor function, oral motor problems, that sort of thing. And those have been a lot of fun, kind of let me stretch my wings a little bit. We do some live, I tell some jokes and stuff like that. And, I'm thinking of dancing, but I haven't started dancing yet. I've got some free videos on my website. One is on shared decision making. It's a video I made for a Canadian conference that I decided to release as a free video for people who are just, I don't understand what the hell shared decision making is, and how can I give a power and still be effective. So that's out there if you're interested in understanding a little bit more. Oh, I also offered another one titled, "Walt, what's your beef with MFR?" And that's a free one. And actually that's been quite popular. And I get like things thrown at me through the internet all the time about that because, hey, let's face it, we are loyal supporters of our tribe, right? And once you leave a tribe, you're seldom viewed in a positive light. But yeah, I this whole education piece is, I'm a part-time practitioner here and part-time, traveling and teaching. We've got a long trip we're leaving for this weekend, and we're teaching a couple classes in England, and I'm going to Greece in May, and I get to teach my first class. It's going to be live translated while I'm teaching, so that's going to be an interesting
Very
experience
cool.
for me.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
I think I have something for you with the shared
What's that?
experience. I think I have something for you with the shared experience. I
Okay.
think it sounds like you're saying fellow travelers,
Mhm.
instead
Yeah,
of
I am.
we're traveling
Yeah,
in this life together. We're all trying to get to
yeah.
the same mountain.
Yeah, 2011, Diane Jacobs and Jacob Silvernail wrote a paper called The Operator versus Interactor Model. And the operator model, simply put, is how you and I were taught in the biomedical model, where we're the expert. We get higher education, higher learning, higher experience in order to be able to figure out what's wrong with someone and be able to figure out what to do about somebody. And patients easily come in and they accept that power disparity. And what Jason and Diane were proposing were to level the playing field, that the two people are interacting. And what I see that is, that paper's from 12 years ago now, and it's sort of another representation of this massive evidence of the need and the efficacy of shared decision making by giving the patient a choice in
I like
everything we do. Yeah,
I like that.
yeah. And the
This was
fellow traveler, right? I mean, the fellow traveler is it. But I tell you what, not every patient wants to travel that way. They want us to make the choices because we're the expert. Do what you think is best. Use what pressure you think is best, Walt, right? We hear that stuff all the time. Um, and I eventually, if somebody really wants that, I'll do it, but I do it like an infant because I don't like doing it. And I have tantrums when I'm forced to just work from my perspective. I keep nurturing that relationship to see if I can get you to give me input so I can make it more safe, effective, and of value to you.
I dig that. This was great. You were great. I really enjoyed
Thank
my
you.
time with you.
I
Every
enjoyed my time with you. I think you're a really good interviewer, and I like your style. And I like that fake background of the naughty pine you've got there, Diane.
I like the fake background. Everybody, thanks for joining. Walt, thank you so much.
You're
Really
welcome.
appreciate
You're
the
welcome.
time.
Anytime. I'll come back anytime with you.